Well, now that Disney and Lucasfilm have destroyed the last remaining legacy franchise they purchased, you have to know that recasting and then remaking or rebooting them all is what comes next, right?
No! No!
There seem to be two types of characters. Those that existed prior to their adaptation on screen and those that were created specifically for TV and movies. Basically, did a character come from a book or comic book or an old story, mythology, or fairy tale, etc.? If so, that makes all the difference in terms of being able to recast them on screen. If they were adapted to screen from a previous source, they're able to be recast after their first appearance, I think.
But why?
Well, easy. The adaptation was already a recasting of sorts, right? For anyone that was familiar with the source materials, even the most perfect casting will never be exactly what the reader imagined. So people are fine with having these characters recast in order to continue the stories, so long as the casting is done to be as close to the source materials as possible. You stray too far and you get fan backlash, which is understandable. Two great examples of this type of character jump to mind for me: James Bond and Superman. Bond has been portrayed on screen now in 26 different movies by 6 different actors across 7 decades. And while everyone has their favorite Bond, because he was already an established character in the Ian Fleming book series, no one ever expected Sean Connery to be the only Bond there ever would be. He was just a caretaker for the role. When they get around to finally casting Daniel Craig's replacement, casting as close to the source materials as possible, as well as to those actors that have already been cast in the role, since they've basically become source material themselves, will be what makes fans happy. You stray too far from that, especially if it's done to appease some perceived modern audience, and the franchise will crash and burn. Trust me. Superman was first seen in print in Action Comics #1 in June of 1938. In 1941, he made his big screen debut in the famed Fleischer animated shorts. In January of '48, he made his first live-action appearance on screen, and from that point on, he's been played by a host of different actors over the years. And of course, in the comics, he's been written and more importantly drawn by countless different artists. All of this leads people to expect Superman to look and act similarly, but never expect him to be exactly the same. So people are fine with recasting or being drawn by new artists in order to tell more stories. Just like Bond, while he's able to be recast, you can't stray too far from who he's expected to be and what he's expected to look like. And while critics love to paint those of us who balked at potentially casting a black actor in the role as racist, it was never about race, but about accuracy. The same fans that didn't want Michael B. Jordan to play Superman also had issues with things as small as Henry Cavill's costume in Man of Steel, because it strayed from the traditional strongman costume with the red outer briefs. Fans are sticklers, after all. From the looks of it, James Gunn has cast a guy in his new Superman movie that at least looks the part, and at 6'4", he actually is tall enough for once, which is a personal pet peeve of mine. Now, I have no hope for Gunn's DCEU going forward for lots of reasons, but kudos on the casting choice at least. So what about those characters that made their debuts on screen? Well, depending on just how iconic they are, they're likely untouchable. So that sucks to be you, Disney, since you just spent a metric shit ton of money buying a bunch of those. Best examples of these happen to be played by the same guy, Indiana Jones and Han Solo. Unlike Bond or Superman, Harrison Ford is these two guys. It's not that both characters couldn't have been played by someone else at first. They could have, and would have never known the difference. And depending on how great their performances were, I'd be making a video about how they couldn't be replaced either. But in our timeline, Ford was cast and both are completely his. Everything about both characters is what Ford brought to them. Now, obviously, both were written heroically and had great scenes and funny lines, but what makes each character iconic is Ford's performance. It's the subtle body language and the way he carries himself. It's the way he perfectly walks the line between badass and goofball. You completely believe that in between adventures, Indy is capable of teaching classes, even if you know his heart isn't in it. And you never really believe that Han Solo is anything but a good guy deep down, even if he tries to act like he's not. That all comes from inside of Harrison Ford. You just can't stick a guy in that role who's about the right age, ruggedly handsome, pretty funny, and can do action scenes. Hell, if you could, we'd be gearing up to see me in Indy 6. Solo tanked for a ton of reasons, but not the least of which was the public's lack of desire to see anyone play that role but Harrison Ford. And you want to see backlash? Wait until Disney announces plans for a new Indiana Jones movie series and they start releasing trial balloons to test the public's interest in their casting choices. It's gonna be a fucking bloodbath. This would be the same for Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, just to be clear. No one wants these types of characters to be recast, but Disney didn't buy Lucasfilm to leave them alone, did they? Just because they've now gotten to every one of the franchises they bought and have now desecrated them doesn't mean they're finished. They're now just getting started, as they've purged the old actors and can recast them and really make them Disney. Until next time, thanks for watching.